Hello everyone, welcome to SleepSpace. Tonight we will talk about one of the oldest and most fascinating questions ever asked by humanity. Are our lives predetermined as if following a script, or do we truly possess free will to shape our own destiny? For thousands of years, philosophers, scientists, and spiritual teachers have wrestled with this puzzle. It is a question that lies at the heart of what it means to be human. If we are scripted, then everything we do, every choice, every thought, every action might already be written into the universe. If we have free will, then our future remains open, waiting for us to choose and create it. This journey will take us through ancient philosophy, modern neuroscience, physics, and even the mysteries of consciousness. And along the way, we will pause to reflect on what this question means for how we live, how we love, and how we make sense of the world. The idea of fate has haunted human imagination since the earliest myths. In ancient Greece, the Moirai, the three fates, were believed to weave the thread of each human life. In Norse mythology, the Norns did the same, binding gods and mortals alike to a tapestry of destiny. These stories reveal something essential, that long before we could measure neurons or calculate probabilities, humans sensed a tension between freedom and inevitability. Were they free to shape their lives, or were they merely players in a cosmic drama already written? Philosophy inherited this question from mythology and treated it with sharp analysis. In the 4th century BCE, Aristotle proposed that while causes set things into motion, humans retain a kind of choice that allows them to deliberate. Yet not all philosophers agreed. The Stoics, for example, argued that everything is governed by logos, the rational order of the cosmos. To them, freedom was not about altering destiny, but accepting it with wisdom. This was a profound shift. Freedom became less about control and more about alignment with the universe. Fast forward to early Christianity, and the debate deepened. Thinkers like Augustine wrestled with the tension between divine foreknowledge and human freedom. If God already knows what we will do, can we really choose otherwise? This theological puzzle echoed through centuries of religious thought, from Islam's discussion of qadar to the debates of medieval Jewish philosophy. Each tradition tried to balance human agency with the possibility of cosmic design. But what about today? Modern science enters this conversation with new tools. Neuroscience, for example, has revealed startling experiments suggesting that the brain makes decisions milliseconds before we become aware of them. In the 1980s, Benjamin Libet conducted studies showing that brain activity predicting a choice appeared before participants reported consciously deciding. This raised a chilling possibility. Perhaps consciousness is not the driver of decisions, but a witness to them, like someone watching a movie that has already been filmed. Some scientists argue this undermines free will entirely. Others counter that these findings are misunderstood, that the brain may prepare possibilities, but consciousness still plays a role in shaping which path is taken. Physics, too, adds another dimension. If the universe is governed by deterministic laws, as classical Newtonian mechanics suggests, then every event unfolds like clockwork from the conditions before it. If we could know the position and motion of every particle, we could, in theory, predict everything that will ever happen. In such a universe, free will appears to vanish. Yet quantum physics complicates this picture. At the smallest scales, particles behave unpredictably, introducing an element of chance into the fabric of reality. But does randomness equal freedom? Or does it simply mean our lives are shaped by probability rather than choice? Psychology also offers insights. We often feel as though we are freely choosing, yet experiments reveal how easily our decisions can be influenced by priming, by suggestion, by unconscious biases. If so much of what we do is shaped by forces beneath awareness, then how much freedom is left? Still, many psychologists argue that even if we are influenced, we are not entirely determined. Awareness, reflection, and self control give us the power to shape habits and redirect our lives, though never in a vacuum. The paradox becomes sharper the more we examine it. On one hand, we crave the security of meaning, that our lives are guided, purposeful, perhaps even destined. On the other, we long for the exhilaration of freedom, the ability to carve our own paths, to choose who we become. Too much fate, and life feels like a prison. Too much freedom, and it risks becoming chaos. This question also touches ethics. If humans lack free will, how do we hold people accountable for their actions? If a person commits a crime, but every decision was the inevitable unfolding of prior causes, can they truly be blamed? Some philosophers argue that responsibility must be redefined, not as absolute freedom, but as participation in the causal chain. Others insist that moral responsibility requires real choice. Otherwise, justice collapses into illusion. The debate extends into technology as well. Artificial intelligence raises new puzzles. If a machine follows algorithms, does it have freedom? If humans themselves are following biological algorithms, how are we different? Is free will simply an emergent property of complexity, or is it an illusion created by the brain to give coherence to our actions? Despite centuries of argument, the question remains unsolved. Perhaps it is unsolvable in a strict sense, but that might be the point. The value lies not in finding a final answer, but in the reflection itself. To ask whether we are scripted or free is to explore what it means to be conscious, to be alive, to be human in a universe whose ultimate nature still eludes us. Tonight, we will wander through this labyrinth. We will walk with philosophers of the past, listen to the voices of modern science, and peer into the mysteries of mind and cosmos. As we do, let us hold the question lightly, neither demanding certainty nor fearing ambiguity. For in the very act of wondering, we find a kind of freedom, perhaps not from destiny, but from the need to settle it once and for all. Long before modern science began mapping brain activity or measuring quantum fluctuations, human beings wondered whether their lives were written into the fabric of the cosmos. Ancient civilizations wrestled with the idea of destiny not in the language of neurons or physics, but in the symbols of myth, ritual, and story. To understand how we came to ask whether life is scripted or free, we need to go back to these roots, where the first frameworks for fate and freedom were imagined. In Mesopotamia, one of the earliest cradles of civilization, the gods were believed to control human destiny. The Babylonians consulted oracles, read omens in the stars, and traced the movements of planets across the night sky, believing that celestial patterns held the blueprint of earthly events. Astrology, born here, was more than entertainment. It was a worldview in which human lives unfolded as extensions of cosmic rhythms. If Mars shifted in the heavens, a king's fate could shift on Earth. In such a world, free will was not absent, but limited. You might pray, sacrifice, or seek guidance to negotiate with the gods, but the broad outlines of your story were fixed. Egyptian thought leaned in a similar direction, though framed differently. Life was governed by Ma'at, the principle of balance, order, and justice. Pharaohs were seen not only as rulers, but as guardians of this cosmic order. Human beings had responsibilities within this system, and failure to live in accordance with Ma'at brought consequences. While this wasn't strict determinism, it suggested that freedom was less about self-invention and more about aligning oneself with a universal law. Greek mythology and philosophy took the idea further. In myth, the Moirai, the Fates, were three sisters who controlled the thread of life. Clotho spun it, Lachesis measured it, and Atropos cut it. Not even Zeus, king of the gods, could overrule them. The image was stark. Life was a thread woven into a tapestry, unspooling toward an inevitable end. Yet alongside this mythic determinism arose a philosophical counterpoint. Thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle began asking whether reason gave humans some measure of freedom. Aristotle, in particular, introduced the notion of potentiality and actuality. He believed that while causes set the stage, humans could deliberate, choosing between possible actions. For Aristotle, a stone dropped from a tower falls according to necessity, but a human facing a moral choice has options and can reason their way toward a decision. This tension between the inevitability of natural law and the special status of human reason echoes through centuries of philosophy. The Stoics, however, turned closer to determinism. They argued that the cosmos is ordered by logos, a rational principle that governs all things. To them, freedom did not mean changing destiny, but understanding and accepting it. Epictetus, the Stoic teacher, said, "Don't seek for everything to happen as you wish it, but wish for everything to happen as it actually does." This was not despair, but liberation. One could not control events, but one could control attitude. In their view, freedom was an inner posture, not the ability to alter the script. Eastern traditions developed their own profound responses. In Hindu philosophy, the concept of karma framed life as the unfolding of consequences from past actions. Every choice plants a seed that ripens across lifetimes. On one hand, this appears deterministic. Your present life is shaped by the weight of previous actions. On the other, it is profoundly empowering. Through choices now, you shape the arc of future existence. Karma bridges fate and freedom by making life both scripted by past causes and open to change through present action. Buddhism added another layer. The Buddha taught that clinging to the idea of a permanent self leads to suffering. If the self is not fixed, then the notion of absolute free will become complicated. What is this self that chooses? Yet Buddhism emphasizes mindfulness and intention, suggesting that while we are conditioned by causes, we can cultivate awareness that shifts our trajectory. Freedom, in this sense, arises not from breaking causality, but from transforming how we relate to it. In China, Taoism offered yet another vision. The Tao, the underlying flow of the universe, shapes all things. To resist it is folly. To move with it is wisdom. Free will, then, is less about control and more about harmony. The image often used is water flowing around rocks, soft, flexible, yet unstoppable. A Taoist sage does not try to overpower destiny, but learns to move with the current, discovering freedom in alignment. When we step back and look at these traditions together, a pattern emerges. Nearly all of them wrestled with the tension between cosmic order and human agency. Myth framed life as woven by gods or fates, while philosophy and spirituality sought ways to preserve some space for human freedom, whether in reason, intention, or attitude. None of these views were purely deterministic, nor purely libertarian. Instead, they sought balance, acknowledging the forces that shape us while affirming the possibility of choice. Why did so many early cultures imagine destiny? Partly because unpredictability frightened them. In a world without modern science, plagues, droughts, and wars seemed to arrive without warning. Believing that gods or fates controlled these events gave them meaning, however harsh. If suffering was scripted, it was not random. At the same time, belief in rituals, prayers, or sacrifices gave people a sense of influence, small levers of freedom within a vast machinery of fate. This dual need, meaning and agency, still shapes us today. We want life to have purpose, but we also want the dignity of choice. Too much determinism and we feel trapped. Too much freedom and we feel adrift. Ancient myths and philosophies remind us that humans have always lived in this paradox. They offer not final answers, but models of how to live within uncertainty. For example, the Stoic acceptance of fate might seem cold at first glance, yet many find in it a source of resilience, a way to endure hardship without despair. Similarly, the Hindu vision of karma can inspire responsibility, reminding us that our choices ripple across time. The Taoist flow offers peace, teaching that freedom does not require control, only attunement. These perspectives are not mutually exclusive but complementary, each illuminating different facets of the same mystery. If we fast forward centuries, these ideas fed directly into religious and philosophical debates of the West. Christianity absorbed Greek thought and overlaid it with questions of divine omniscience. Islam grappled with qadar, or divine decree, and its relation to human accountability. Judaism balanced God's foreknowledge with human responsibility. The stage was set for medieval and modern thinkers to refine the puzzle. If the universe, or God, already knows the script, do we truly improvise any of our lines? Before we leap into theology and science, though, it's worth pausing on the emotional dimension. Imagine being an ancient farmer, looking at the stars, praying for rain. You might believe that your fate is written in the heavens, yet every day you choose to sow seeds, to work the soil, to feed your family. In that lived reality, the question of free will is not abstract. It's about whether your actions matter, whether effort makes a difference. And that, in many ways, is still the heart of the question for us today. The ancient world leaves us with a paradoxical inheritance. On one hand, it insists that life unfolds within an order greater than ourselves, be it God's, karma, or the Tao. On the other, it affirms that within this order, human beings still act, still choose, still bear responsibility. The script may exist, but perhaps it leaves room for improvisation, or perhaps the very act of wondering whether we are free is itself the deepest expression of freedom we have. As philosophy matured and religion spread across the world, the old question of fate versus freedom took on a new dimension. If God exists, all-knowing and eternal, how can human beings truly make choices? For ancient polytheistic myths, destiny was woven by impersonal forces or by many gods with competing wills. But in the great monotheistic traditions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, the idea of a single divine being who knows everything raised the stakes. If God already knows what you will do tomorrow, can you act otherwise? Christianity confronted this paradox from its earliest days. In the writings of the Apostle Paul, one finds a tension between divine grace and human action. Paul wrote of predestination, God's foreknowledge of who would be saved, yet also urged his listeners to choose rightly, to live in accordance with their faith. The seeds of debate were planted. Are we saved because of God's eternal plan, or because of our decisions? St. Augustine of Hippo, one of the most influential early Christian thinkers, wrestled with this question deeply. Living in the 4th and 5th centuries, Augustine reflected on his own conversion and the mystery of divine grace. He argued that God, being outside of time, knows all things, past, present, and future. This knowledge, however, does not force events to happen. From Augustine's perspective, God's foreknowledge is like watching from a mountaintop. One can see the travelers on the road below, know where they are going, but not compel their steps. And yet, Augustine also taught that true freedom was found not in choosing otherwise, but in aligning the will with God's goodness. In other words, the will was free. but it achieved its true purpose only when guided by divine grace. This sparked centuries of debate. Later, theologians like Thomas Aquinas refined Augustine's views. Aquinas distinguished between God's knowledge and human freedom by invoking the idea of different kinds of causality. God, he said, is the primary cause of all things, but within creation, secondary causes, including human wills, operate genuinely. From God's eternal perspective, everything is known, but within time, humans experience their choices as real and meaningful. Aquinas' framework attempted to preserve both divine omniscience and human responsibility. Meanwhile, other strands of Christian thought leaned toward a stronger determinism. The Protestant reformer John Calvin emphasized predestination in a more uncompromising way. For Calvin, God's sovereignty meant that everything unfolded according to divine will, including who was destined for salvation. Critics argued that this stripped humans of meaningful freedom, reducing life to a script already written. Defenders countered that God's justice and wisdom were beyond human comprehension, and that accepting predestination was itself an act of faith. The struggle between these views reveals a deeper tension. Religion sought to uphold both God's power and human dignity. Too much emphasis on divine control, and freedom seemed to vanish. Too much emphasis on human freedom, and divine omniscience seemed threatened. The solution was often to hold both in paradox, affirming that God knows and ordains, yet humans are somehow still responsible. Islam grappled with a parallel question through the doctrine of qadar, or divine decree. The Quran teaches that God is all-knowing and that nothing happens without his will. At the same time, it emphasizes human accountability for choices. Early Muslim theologians split into two camps. One group, the Qadariyya, stressed free will, arguing that without genuine choice, moral responsibility would be meaningless. The opposing camp, the Jabriyya, emphasized God's absolute control, seeing humans as instruments of divine will. As Islamic thought matured, scholars sought middle ground. The Ash'ari school, one of the most influential, developed the concept of acquisition. According to this idea, God creates all actions, but humans acquire them through intention. In other words, God is the ultimate source of events, but humans still participate in them by assenting or rejecting. This allowed theologians to affirm both divine omnipotence and human responsibility. It also echoed themes seen in Christianity. The tension could not be erased, but it could be reframed to preserve balance. Judaism, with its long tradition of legal and ethical responsibility, added another layer. The Hebrew Bible is filled with stories where human beings are called to choose. Moses tells the Israelites, "I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore choose life, that you and your offspring may live." Choice is not presented as an illusion, but as a commandment. Yet Jewish philosophers, especially in the medieval period, also wrestled with God's foreknowledge. If God knows the future, does that mean the future is fixed? The medieval Jewish philosopher Maimonides argued that God's knowledge is fundamentally different from human knowledge. Humans know things in time, sequentially, but God's knowledge is eternal and outside of time. From this perspective, God's foreknowledge does not cause events. It simply encompasses them in a way humans cannot fully understand. Maimonides acknowledged that this was difficult to grasp, but insisted that divine knowledge and human freedom were not incompatible, even if their relationship lay beyond human reason. Across these traditions, one sees similar patterns: the insistence that humans are responsible, the affirmation of divine omniscience, and the struggle to reconcile the two. Each developed metaphors and frameworks to soften the paradox, but none eliminated it. Why does this matter? Because these debates shape not just theology, but law, morality, and everyday life. If humans are free, then moral systems make sense. Laws, commandments, and accountability are grounded in genuine choice. If humans are not free, then punishment and reward seem unjust, unless one redefines justice itself. The stakes were high, not only for abstract philosophy, but for how entire societies understood responsibility. It also mattered for how people understood suffering. If tragedy strikes, is it because of fate, because of human choices, or because of divine will? In Christian thought, Augustine's Theodicy, his attempt to explain the existence of evil, relied on the idea of free will. God, being perfectly good, did not create evil. Rather, evil came from humans misusing their freedom. This defense of God's goodness required preserving human freedom, at least in some form. Similarly, in Islam, the coexistence of divine decree and human accountability provided a framework to understand both suffering and justice. Even today, echoes of these debates remain. Many people, whether religious or not, feel the tension between the sense of being guided by something larger and the experience of choosing. In everyday life, one might pray for guidance, yet also deliberate carefully about decisions. One might thank destiny for a chance encounter, yet also feel proud of the choices that made it possible. The paradox is lived as much as it is argued. Interestingly, the religious traditions also suggest a redefinition of freedom. In Augustine, true freedom meant not the ability to do anything, but the ability to will the good. In Islam, freedom lay in aligning one's will with God's. In Judaism, freedom was expressed in obeying the law and choosing life. These are not the modern ideas of freedom as unlimited options, but visions of freedom as flourishing within order. Perhaps this reframing itself holds wisdom. Maybe freedom is not about escaping all scripts, but about finding meaning in the script we inhabit. The debates of theologians did not end the paradox. They enshrined it. They preserved the tension as a central mystery of human existence. In a way, this was honest. Perhaps the question cannot be answered fully. Perhaps the point is not to resolve it, but to live faithfully within it. Whether one leans more toward fate, more toward freedom, or holds them both in creative balance. From the myths of the fates to the reasoning of Aquinas, from the poetry of the Quran to the laws of Moses, humanity has kept circling the same puzzle. Are we free or are we guided? The answer seems to resist final closure. And maybe, just maybe, that is why the question has lasted so long, because it reflects something about the mystery of being human itself. With the dawn of the scientific revolution in the 16th and 17th centuries, human understanding of the universe underwent a profound transformation. The telescope, the printing press, the methodical collection of data, all of these tools combined to open new windows on reality. Where earlier ages looked to gods, fates, or divine decrees to explain the world, modern science increasingly sought explanations in natural law. And with this shift came a new model of the universe, not as a mysterious tapestry woven by unseen forces, but as a vast clockwork machine, governed by mathematical precision. At the heart of this transformation was Isaac Newton. In 1687, his Principia Mathematica unveiled the laws of motion and universal gravitation. Suddenly, the motions of planets, tides, and even projectiles on Earth could be explained through the same set of principles. The cosmos was no longer a realm of unpredictable divine intervention, but a grand system of causes and effects, predictable and orderly. If you knew the position and momentum of every particle, you could, in principle, calculate everything that would ever happen. This view, known as determinism, carried enormous implications. If the universe is a machine, then everything in it, including human beings, must follow the same rules. Every thought, every decision, every action would be the inevitable result of prior causes, stretching backward in time to the very beginning of the cosmos. In such a universe, freedom seemed to evaporate. We might feel as though we choose, but perhaps we are simply following the causal chain written into the fabric of reality. The French philosopher Pierre-Simon Laplace gave this vision its most famous articulation. He imagined a powerful intellect, later nicknamed Laplace's demon, that could, if it knew the position and momentum of every particle, calculate the past and future with perfect accuracy. In this picture, the entire history of the universe is like a book already written, every page following from the one before. The present is not open but fixed, determined by the laws of physics and the state of the cosmos at its origin. For some, this vision was exhilarating. It suggested that nature could be understood, predicted, and perhaps even controlled. Science was triumphant, banishing superstition and mystery. For others, it was unsettling, stripping humans of genuine freedom and reducing them to cogs in a cosmic machine. The debate about fate and free will entered a new phase, not about gods and foreknowledge, but about laws and mechanics. Philosophers of the Enlightenment wrestled with these implications. Some, like the materialists of 18th century France, embraced determinism wholeheartedly. They argued that humans are nothing more than matter in motion, subject to the same laws as planets and atoms. Consciousness, choice, morality, these were byproducts of physical processes, not evidence of freedom. To them, free will was an illusion born from ignorance of the causes that move us. Others tried to preserve freedom within this mechanistic world. Immanuel Kant, writing in the late 18th century, distinguished between the world of phenomena, what we experience, and the noumenal realm, things as they are in themselves. In the phenomenal world, determinism reigns. Every event follows from prior causes. But Kant argued that in the noumenal realm, the realm of moral responsibility, humans must be free. Without freedom, he insisted, ethics collapses. We hold ourselves and others accountable only because we assume the capacity to choose otherwise. For Kant, freedom could not be proven scientifically, but it was a necessary postulate of moral life. The rise of science also reshaped religion's approach to fate and freedom. Some theologians embraced determinism as evidence of divine order, seeing the clockwork universe as the handiwork of God. Others worried that it left no room for human agency or divine intervention. The tension between natural law and spiritual freedom grew sharper, influencing debates well into the modern era. Beyond philosophy, determinism found echoes in the social sciences. In the 19th century, thinkers like Karl Marx argued that human history unfolds according to material forces, economic structures, class struggles, and the means of production. Individual choices matter, but only within the larger script of historical necessity. Sigmund Freud, exploring the human psyche, suggested that unconscious drives shape our behavior far more than conscious choice. Charles Darwin, with his theory of evolution by natural selection, presented life itself as the outcome of natural laws and random variation, unfolding over vast stretches of time. Each of these perspectives reinforced a sense that human freedom might be narrower than it appears. If economics, psychology, and biology determine much of who we are and what we do, then how much control is left for the conscious self? The mechanistic vision of Newton's universe spilled over into every corner of thought, painting a picture of humans as deeply shaped, if not fully scripted, by forces beyond their awareness. And yet, resistance persisted. The very sense of freedom, the experience of choosing, remained stubbornly vivid. No matter how convincing the scientific arguments, people continued to feel that they were agents of their own lives. This raised a profound question. If free will is an illusion, why is it such a powerful one? Why would evolution or nature design a mind that believes in choice if none exists? Some scientists argued that this illusion has survival value. Believing in free will might motivate action, responsibility, and planning. Even if our choices are determined, the sense of choosing could serve a practical function. Others countered that the experience of freedom is too central to dismiss so easily, and that perhaps science had not yet found the full picture. Indeed, cracks in the clockwork vision began to appear in the early 20th century. With the rise of quantum mechanics, physicists discovered that at the smallest scales, particles do not behave deterministically, but probabilistically. An electron's position cannot be predicted with certainty, only with probability. The universe, it seemed, was not a perfectly predictable machine after all. But did this restore free will? Not necessarily. Randomness is not the same as freedom. A dice roll may be unpredictable, but it is not a choice. If our lives are shaped by quantum uncertainty, that may break strict determinism, but it does not automatically create agency. Instead, it complicates the picture, suggesting that the universe is not scripted with absolute precision, but neither is it wholly open. This tension between determinism and indeterminism set the stage for modern debates in physics, neuroscience, and philosophy. Are we machines following causal chains, or conscious agents capable of self-determination? Is freedom an illusion crafted by the brain, or a real phenomenon that science has yet to explain? The questions only deepened as the scientific revolution advanced. Looking back, the rise of the clockwork universe reshaped the question of free will in profound ways. It stripped away many of the mythic and religious frameworks that had previously explained destiny, replacing them with the austere elegance of natural law. It challenged humans to see themselves not as exceptions to the universe, but as participants in its order, and it forced philosophers to ask whether freedom could survive in a world governed by causes and effects. What is striking is how the old themes endured. Just as the Stoics urged acceptance of logos, Newton's followers saw order in the cosmos. Just as Augustine and Maimonides wrestled with divine foreknowledge, Enlightenment thinkers wrestled with Laplace's demon. The language changed, but the puzzle remained. Whether fate is woven by gods or by physics, the human yearning for freedom presses back against it, refusing to be silenced. Perhaps this is what makes the debate so enduring. Every time we think we have an answer, the mystery deepens. The clockwork universe seemed to close the case, and yet cracks appeared. Determinism seemed unshakable, and yet freedom persisted in human experience. The question would not go away. It would only evolve as new discoveries reshaped the boundaries of what we could imagine. The clockwork universe painted a compelling picture. Cause leads to effect. Every particle and every human decision, a link in a vast chain stretching from the dawn of time. Yet by the early 20th century, this elegant vision began to crack. Quantum physics, chaos theory, and emerging discoveries in complex systems introduced a new layer of uncertainty. Suddenly, the universe seemed far less predictable, and the neat distinction between determinism and freedom blurred in ways that continue to challenge our understanding. quantum mechanics emerged as a radical departure from classical physics. At the subatomic level, particles do not follow strict, deterministic paths. Instead, their behaviors are described in terms of probabilities. Werner Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, formulated in 1927, revealed a fundamental limit. The more precisely we know a particle's position, the less precisely we can know its momentum, and vice versa. The universe at its smallest scale resists absolute prediction. What seemed to be a fixed script now appeared probabilistic, inherently uncertain, and profoundly strange. This unpredictability forced scientists to reconsider classical determinism. If electrons, photons, and other subatomic particles behave unpredictably, what does that mean for the larger systems they constitute, including the human brain? Some philosophers and physicists argued that quantum randomness might allow for a form of freedom. Even if the chain of causality is largely intact, microscopic unpredictability could amplify through complex systems, introducing genuine novelty into the world. The universe, it seemed, was not perfectly scripted. It allowed room for chance. Yet randomness alone is not freedom. A die roll is unpredictable, but it does not choose. In the same way, quantum uncertainty provides variability, not agency. The challenge, then, is understanding how unpredictability interacts with consciousness. Could the human mind harness these probabilistic processes in a meaningful way? Or does the experience of choice remain an illusion superimposed on a fundamentally mechanical reality? The questions are subtle and profound. At the same time, chaos theory offered another lens on unpredictability, but in a different sense. Unlike quantum mechanics, which operates at microscopic scales, chaos theory deals with deterministic systems that are extremely sensitive to initial conditions. The classic example is the weather. A small change in temperature or wind can drastically alter outcomes over time, producing what is popularly called the butterfly effect. Even if the underlying laws are deterministic, long-term prediction becomes practically impossible. The world, in this sense, is scripted but incomprehensibly intricate, leaving space for what appears to be spontaneous novelty. Chaos theory reshaped how scientists think about predictability and human agency. Complex systems, from ecosystems to economies to the brain, exhibit behaviors that are orderly yet unpredictable. The deterministic clockwork image loses its suffocating strictness. Even if the universe obeys causal laws, the outcomes are so sensitive and entangled that the notion of a pre-written script begins to blur. In practical terms, the universe is both determined and surprising, leaving room for creativity, adaptation, and perhaps the experience of freedom. Modern neuroscience also enters this conversation. While classical determinism suggested that neurons fire according to prior causes, experiments in the late 20th century began revealing subtle probabilistic behaviors. For example, while some neuronal firing patterns are predictable, others seem to emerge spontaneously or in response to tiny fluctuations in the brain's environment. The brain, like a complex system, operates at the intersection of order and chaos. While physical laws govern it, the interactions of billions of neurons generate emergent phenomena, thought, creativity, consciousness, that are not easily reducible to simple causes. This led some theorists to suggest that free will might be an emergent property of complex systems. Emergence occurs when the collective behavior of a system cannot be predicted from its individual parts. A single neuron does not decide, but networks of neurons produce patterns of thought, intention, and choice that feel real and consequential. In this framework, freedom is not absolute. It is not escaping all causality, but it is real in the sense that human beings can produce novel outcomes within constraints. We improvise, plan, and act in ways that cannot be fully reduced to prior causes. Chaos, quantum uncertainty, and emergence together suggest a universe that is neither strictly deterministic nor entirely free. Instead, it is a spectrum. Some events are rigidly constrained, others are probabilistic or emergent. Human choice may lie in the middle, influenced by biology, environment, and prior causes, yet capable of generating outcomes that are genuinely new. In other words, the script may exist, but we have a capacity to improvise within it. This intersection of science and philosophy echoes themes from ancient thought. The Stoics taught that we cannot control external events, but can shape our responses. Buddhism emphasizes mindful attention and intention. The Taoist flow invites alignment rather than coercion. Modern science, in a surprising way, revives similar insights. The universe constrains us, yet it is neither perfectly rigid nor utterly chaotic. Within its patterns, we find space to act. Of course, not all scientists or philosophers agree. Some maintain a strict materialist determinism, arguing that quantum randomness does not create agency and that all human behavior ultimately results from prior causes. Others embrace the probabilistic and emergent perspectives, suggesting that freedom is real, if nuanced. The debate remains unresolved, but the very language of science has expanded the conceptual space in which freedom can exist. The implications of this shift are profound for how we think about morality, creativity, and personal responsibility. If the universe allows for unpredictability and emergent novelty, then human actions matter in ways previously unimagined. Moral choices are not illusions. Creativity is not a trick of neurons. And the experience of making decisions is not simply a byproduct of mechanistic processes. Chance and complexity give weight to our efforts, even in a universe governed by laws. This also invites reflection on how we live. If some events are probabilistic or emergent, we are part of a dynamic and evolving reality, capable of shaping outcomes in ways that are neither predetermined nor random. Life becomes a partnership with reality, a dance in which structure and improvisation coexist. We are neither fully scripted characters nor entirely free spirits. We exist in the tension, and it is in this tension that meaning, wonder, and agency arise. In a sense, the universe itself mirrors our inner experience. Just as our minds are shaped by both biology and consciousness, so the cosmos is shaped by law and chance. Understanding this duality can inspire humility and curiosity. We may not control everything, but we can act, reflect, and respond in ways that ripple outward. This perspective offers a new kind of freedom, not an escape from causality, but a way to navigate it with awareness. The dance of determinism and freedom is thus neither abstract nor distant. It is lived every day in our choices, our habits, and our reflections. Science does not provide easy answers, but it gives us tools to explore the mystery. Quantum physics, chaos theory, and neuroscience reveal a universe alive with possibility, complex, unpredictable, and generative. Within this world, the ancient question, are we scripted or free, takes on renewed depth and urgency. As we move from the cosmic and probabilistic to the intimate scale of human experience, neuroscience brings the question of free will into the brain itself. For centuries, philosophers and theologians pondered freedom and destiny as abstract ideas. Today, scientists are measuring electrical activity, mapping neural networks, and probing the very processes that underlie thought and decision. The results are both fascinating and unsettling, forcing us to reconsider what it means to choose. One of the most influential experiments in this field was conducted by Benjamin Libet in the 1980s. Libet studied volunteers who were asked to make spontaneous movements, like flexing a wrist, while he measured their brain activity. The surprising finding was that a specific pattern of brain activity, called the readiness potential, appeared several hundred milliseconds before participants reported a conscious decision to act. In other words, the brain seemed to initiate action before the conscious mind was aware of it. Libet's experiment sparked intense debate. At first glance, it suggested that conscious free will is an illusion. If the brain decides before we are aware, then what we experience as conscious choice may merely be a narrative we tell ourselves after the fact. Our sense of control, some argued, could be a sophisticated post hoc explanation, giving coherence to actions that have already been set in motion. Yet this interpretation is not the whole story. Libet himself offered a nuanced perspective. He suggested that while initiation of action may be unconscious, consciousness retains a kind of veto power. That is, even if the brain begins preparing a movement, the conscious mind can inhibit or allow it. In this way, consciousness participates in decision-making without necessarily being the prime mover. Freedom might exist not in initiating every action, but in shaping, regulating, and reflecting on them. Subsequent research has expanded and complicated these findings. Modern neuroimaging studies can predict decisions several seconds before participants report them, suggesting that unconscious processes play a substantial role in shaping choices. Yet these predictions are probabilistic, not absolute. The brain may lean toward a certain decision, but variability remains. Moreover, these experiments often involve simple, artificial tasks like moving a finger or pressing a button. Complex decisions, such as moral judgments, career choices, or creative projects, likely engage higher-order cognitive processes, including reflection, planning, and anticipation. Consciousness may still exert meaningful influence in these domains. The neuroscience of decision-making also reveals the role of emotion, memory, and habit. Choices are rarely made in a vacuum. Past experiences shape preferences. Neural networks encode patterns of behavior, and emotions bias attention and evaluation. Even when we feel we are making a purely rational choice, unconscious factors are at play. This does not necessarily eliminate freedom, it reframes it. Freedom may not be absolute autonomy, but the ability to become aware of influences and act in alignment with values, goals, or intentions. Some theorists suggest that consciousness itself may be an emergent property of the brain's complexity. Just as a storm emerges from interactions of air, temperature, and pressure, conscious experience may emerge from billions of interacting neurons. If so, free will could be an emergent phenomenon, not independent of causality, but arising within it. Conscious deliberation, reflection, and self-regulation could then be understood as real, even if grounded in physical processes. Freedom becomes relational rather than absolute. This perspective resonates with the concept of compatibilism in philosophy. Compatibilists argue that free will and determinism are not mutually exclusive. Even in a causally structured universe, humans can be free in the sense that their actions reflect their desires, reasoning, and intentions. The brain may operate according to physical laws, yet conscious reflection allows individuals to endorse, modify, or resist impulses. Freedom is expressed not as uncaused action, but as self-guided behavior within constraints. Neuroscience also highlights the limitations of our intuitive sense of freedom. Cognitive biases, social pressures, and subtle priming influence decisions in ways that escape awareness. Experiments show that people can be led to make choices simply by exposing them to certain words, images, or contexts. The brain constantly integrates internal and external signals, often faster than conscious thought can register. Yet this does not negate the possibility of meaningful choice, it merely illuminates its complexity. Awareness and reflection can expand the space of action. Consider moral decisions. Neuroimaging studies reveal that brain regions associated with emotion, empathy, and reasoning all interact during ethical judgment. The experience of choice emerges from this network, not from a single decision center. Freedom may not be a simple yes or no mechanism. It may be the dynamic interplay of many influences, some conscious, some unconscious. Understanding these mechanisms deepens rather than diminishes the significance of human agency. The role of time is also crucial. Conscious deliberation often occurs over seconds, minutes, or longer. While micro-decisions like finger movements can be predicted milliseconds in advance, longer-term choices involve narrative, planning, and self-reflection. A student choosing a career, an artist deciding on a composition, or a person weighing moral action is operating at a scale far removed from immediate neural impulses. In this sense, freedom exists in the orchestration of complex processes over time. Interestingly, neuroscience also suggests that the very feeling of choice, subjective experience, is adaptive. Belief in agency encourages responsibility, planning, and cooperation. Even if some decisions are strongly influenced by unconscious processes, perceiving oneself as an agent fosters behaviors that benefit the individual and society. The illusion, if it is one, has survival value. Yet there is reason to believe it is more than mere illusion. The brain integrates unconscious and conscious processes in ways that genuinely produce novel outcomes. Finally, modern research underscores the interplay of biology and environment. Genetics, neurochemistry, and brain structure provide a foundation, but experience, learning, and culture shape neural networks. Humans are neither fully free nor fully determined. Our choices emerge from a web of influences, yet reflection, deliberation, and awareness allow us to navigate this web with increasing intentionality. Freedom, in this context, is the capacity to act within constraints, to guide impulses toward goals, and to shape our future through informed, conscious decisions. The neuroscience of free will does not provide absolute answers, but it enriches our understanding. It reveals a world where the brain initiates, consciousness reflects, and action emerges from the interplay of forces seen and unseen. In this world, choice is not simple, but neither is it illusory. It exists in the dynamic integration of biology, mind, and environment. Understanding this complexity invites humility, curiosity, and reflection on what it means to be human. As neuroscience continues to reveal the inner workings of the brain, philosophers have engaged these findings with renewed intensity. The question of free will is no longer merely metaphysical, it is biological, psychological, and profoundly human. How should we interpret the insights of Liebet, quantum mechanics, and emergent complexity? Can humans retain meaning, responsibility, and authenticity in a universe that seems at once determined and probabilistic? Philosophical traditions from the past few centuries offer guidance. One prominent response is compatibilism, which seeks to reconcile determinism with freedom. Compatibilist thinkers, ranging from David Hume to modern philosophers, argue that freedom does not require the absence of causality. Instead, it resides in the ability to act according to one's desires, reasoning, and intentions, even if those desires themselves are influenced by prior causes. In other words, we are free when our actions express our character and rational reflection, not when they are uncaused. Compatibilism resonates with insights from neuroscience. Even if brain activity precedes conscious awareness, the capacity to deliberate, reflect, and inhibit impulses aligns with the compatibilist notion of freedom. Consciousness may act less as the originator of action and more as a regulator, orchestrating behavior in ways consistent with values and goals. In this sense, freedom is relational, embedded within the structures of the brain, society, and the environment. Existentialist philosophy offers a complementary perspective. Thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, and Albert Camus acknowledged constraints from biology, society, and circumstance, but emphasized the radical responsibility inherent in human existence. Sartre famously declared that humans are condemned to be free, suggesting that even when external forces shape us, we must assume responsibility for our choices. The existentialist approach focuses less on metaphysical absolutes and more on lived experience. Freedom is the conscious recognition that we shape meaning through our actions. Neuroscience and existentialism intersect in intriguing ways. Experiments show that unconscious processes influence choices, but existentialist thought reminds us that awareness, reflection, and intentionality are central to authentic living. Even if our preferences and habits are partially shaped by biology, the act of recognizing, questioning, and redirecting them constitutes meaningful freedom. We may not control all causal chains, but we can navigate them with awareness. Philosophical reflection also highlights the importance of moral responsibility. Determinism, whether strict or probabilistic, challenges traditional notions of blame and praise. Yet many compatibilists argue that responsibility does not vanish simply because choices are influenced by prior causes. What matters is the capacity to act in accordance with one's reasoning and values. Holding people accountable becomes a matter of encouraging reflection, cultivating virtue, and shaping behavior, rather than punishing preordained inevitability. Emerging theories in philosophy of mind further complicate the picture. Consciousness itself may be central to freedom. While many brain processes occur unconsciously, conscious awareness allows us to step back, evaluate options, and simulate future scenarios. The ability to project oneself into possible outcomes, consider consequences, and choose intentionally may constitute a unique form of agency. In this light, free will is not about escaping causality, but about integrating it into a reflective, intentional life. Some thinkers propose degrees of freedom rather than an absolute yes or no answer. Our choices vary in autonomy. Some are habitual, almost automatic, shaped by deeply ingrained neural patterns. Others are reflective, deliberate, and guided by conscious values. Life becomes a spectrum of agency, ranging from highly constrained actions to creative, intentional interventions. Recognizing this spectrum can reduce anxiety about determinism, while affirming the meaningfulness of thoughtful action. Existentialist philosophy also grapples with the emotional dimension of freedom. Awareness of contingency, mortality, and the influence of forces beyond our control can provoke anxiety, uncertainty, and even despair. Yet this confrontation with limitation is also what gives life depth. Freedom is not simply a matter of limitless choice. It is the courage to act authentically within constraints. In a universe that is part scripted, part probabilistic, embracing responsibility and intentionality becomes a profound act of creation. Creativity, art, and innovation illustrate this balance. Composers, writers, and inventors operate within constraints of medium, culture, and biology. Yet within these constraints, they generate outcomes that are genuinely new. The deterministic elements of their brains and environment do not eliminate originality. Instead, they provide the framework in which novel patterns emerge. Similarly, human life unfolds within both structure and uncertainty, and freedom manifests in how we navigate and shape that unfolding. Philosophical reflection also emphasizes meaning-making. If some aspects of life are determined by prior causes or probabilistic processes, how do we maintain significance? Here, the human capacity for narrative and reflection plays a crucial role. We construct stories about ourselves, our choices, and our relationships. These narratives give coherence and purpose, even in a universe that is partially scripted. Freedom, then, is both practical and existential. It is the ability to act intentionally and to shape the meaning of one's life. The dialogue between philosophy and neuroscience also raises questions about responsibility to others. Understanding that people are influenced by biology, environment, and unconscious processes can foster empathy and compassion. At the same time, awareness of the capacity for reflection and self-guidance underscores the importance of moral and ethical cultivation. We navigate a world where causality constrains us, but consciousness and intention allow us to respond with creativity, care, and deliberation. In sum, the philosophical response to modern science is not to reject determinism, nor to claim absolute freedom. It is to locate freedom in the lived experience of reflection, intention, and responsibility. Compatibilism offers a framework that reconciles causality and choice. Existentialism reminds us that awareness and ethical engagement are central to human life. Neuroscience provides insights into the mechanisms of decision-making, while philosophy interprets their significance for agency, ethics, and meaning. The enduring paradox remains: we are shaped by forces beyond our control, yet we experience and exercise choice. The tension is not a flaw in understanding, it is a reflection of the complex nature of existence. Life unfolds at the intersection of determinism and emergence, causality and consciousness, habit and reflection. In this interplay, we find the conditions for creativity, moral responsibility, and the profound sense of agency that defines human life. Through this lens, freedom becomes less about escaping fate entirely and more about engaging actively with the forces that shape us. We improvise, we respond, we reflect, and in doing so, we create a life that is uniquely our own. The brain may reveal constraints, the universe may reveal probabilities, yet the human spirit continues to explore, choose, and shape meaning within these bounds. So far, we have explored destiny through myths, theology, classical mechanics, quantum physics, and neuroscience. Yet humans do not exist in isolation. Our brains, our biology, and our consciousness all interact within societies, cultures, and networks of influence. Freedom, it turns out, is not only a personal or cosmic question, it is a social one. Understanding how societal and cultural forces shape our choices is essential to exploring whether we are truly scripted or whether our agency can emerge within these larger frameworks. Consider the concept of social conditioning. From birth, individuals are immersed in a set of norms, rules, and expectations. Language, customs, and cultural narratives structure perception, decision-making, and behavior. In a sense, much of our experience is pre-scripted by context. We learn to value certain goals, respond to specific cues, and anticipate consequences in patterned ways. A child raised in one culture may see opportunity and constraint very differently than a child raised elsewhere. Social context, therefore, shapes the script of life in ways that often feel invisible because they are deeply internalized. Behavioral science reinforces this insight. Experiments in psychology show that human behavior is heavily influenced by subtle cues. For example, studies of priming demonstrate that exposure to certain words, images, or environments can affect decisions, attitudes, and even moral judgments. Social psychologists have documented phenomena like conformity, obedience, and the bystander effect, illustrating that the presence and expectations of others can dramatically shape choices. Even when we feel autonomous, our minds are attuned to the social world, often unconsciously. Yet here too, there is room for agency. Awareness of social influence can create space for reflection and resistance. People can recognize biases, question cultural norms, and act in ways that deviate from expectation. Freedom, in this sense, is relational. It exists in dialogue with external forces rather than in their absence. Just as a jazz musician improvises within the structure of a song, humans navigate social scripts with varying degrees of creativity and intentionality. Philosophical thought experiments illuminate this tension vividly. Imagine a person raised entirely in a single cultural environment, unaware of alternatives. Is their freedom limited? Could they have made different choices if circumstances were different? The exercise highlights the interplay of internal decision-making and external influence. Freedom is never absolute, but it is meaningful when consciousness and reflection allow deviation, adaptation, or innovation within constraints. Social pressures are not merely abstract, they are encoded in structures and institutions. Laws, education, and economic systems create incentives and limitations. Choices about career, relationships, and behavior are shaped by these external structures, creating patterns that can feel predetermined. Yet within these structures, humans find ways to assert individuality, creativity, and moral judgment. The complexity of social life mirrors the complexity of the brain. Multiple layers interact, producing outcomes that are sometimes predictable, sometimes emergent. One way to understand this is through the concept of affordances. In psychology and design theory, affordances are possibilities for action provided by the environment. A chair affords sitting, a path affords walking. Similarly, society affords certain behaviors while constraining others. Affordances shape action but do not dictate it entirely. Within constraints, people exercise agency by choosing among available options, combining them in novel ways, or even altering the environment itself. The dance of freedom and constraint is ongoing, dynamic, and emergent. Culture also shapes the narratives we tell ourselves about freedom. In individualistic societies, freedom is often framed as personal autonomy, choice, and self-expression. In collectivist societies, freedom may be understood as the ability to act in harmony with social roles, responsibilities, and relationships. Both perspectives highlight that freedom is not merely an internal property, but a lived experience situated within context. What feels like constraint in one setting may feel like guidance or purpose in another. Behavioral economics adds another layer. Studies of decision-making under scarcity show that constraints, financial, temporal, or informational, limit the range of choices. Even so, humans display remarkable adaptability. Creativity, problem-solving, and negotiation emerge within constraints, illustrating that freedom does not require unlimited options. It emerges in the capacity to navigate complexity effectively. Constraints can even enhance freedom in a counterintuitive way by providing structure within which meaningful choices are possible. Philosophy again offers insight. Thinkers like Isaiah Berlin distinguish between negative freedom, freedom from interference, and positive freedom, the capacity to act in alignment with one's rational will. Social influences can limit negative freedom, but they may also provide the tools, knowledge, and relationships necessary for positive freedom. Understanding freedom as relational rather than absolute allows us to appreciate the interplay of internal choice and external context. Historical examples illustrate this balance vividly. Consider the lives of individuals who acted against dominant social norms: civil rights activists, innovators, or dissidents. Their agency emerged not from total independence, but from the capacity to recognize constraints, imagine alternatives, and act creatively within or against the social scripts around them. The very fact that their actions could surprise, influence, or reshape society demonstrates the dynamic interaction of structure and freedom. Even subtle elements of culture matter. Language, narrative, and symbols influence thought and imagination. The stories we inherit from myths, literature, and history frame our understanding of what is possible. In this sense, freedom is not only about choices made moment to moment, but about the ability to reinterpret inherited scripts, envision new possibilities, and engage with the world creatively. The capacity to rewrite parts of the script, however limited, constitutes meaningful agency. This perspective bridges ancient and modern thought. Just as the Stoics emphasized aligning with logos while exercising inner judgment, and the Taoists taught moving with the flow while acting skillfully, modern social science and philosophy suggest that human freedom emerges in dialogue with structure. Our choices matter, but they are always embedded in broader networks of influence. Awareness, reflection, and imagination allow us to navigate these networks, improvise, and co-create meaning. The interplay of internal and external influence also challenges simplistic narratives about destiny. While certain aspects of life may be scripted by social, biological, and environmental factors, unpredictability and human ingenuity introduce genuine novelty. Cultural norms can guide behavior, yet individual reflection can reshape norms. Probabilistic events in the brain and environment combine with conscious deliberation to produce outcomes that are neither entirely predetermined nor purely random. Life unfolds in a dynamic tension between influence and agency. Ultimately, the social perspective reminds us that freedom is multidimensional. It is biological and neurological, probabilistic and emergent, relational and contextual. We are influenced by the brain, the cosmos, and society, yet we navigate, interpret, and shape these forces in real time. Even within constraints, action can be meaningful, novel, and morally significant. We are both scripted and improvising, following patterns and creating new ones. In this light, the question of whether we are scripted transforms from a yes or no dilemma into a rich exploration of interaction. The script is present, but it is not complete. We improvise within it, adapt to it, and sometimes rewrite it. Human freedom, therefore, is best understood as the art of navigating complexity. Embracing constraints while exercising creativity, reflection, and responsibility. It is the experience of meaningful action within a world that is at once patterned, probabilistic, and alive with possibility. As we move closer to the end of our journey through fate, freedom, and the human mind, it is essential to consider how these ideas play out in the lived experience. The question of whether we are scripted or free is not only philosophical or scientific, it is deeply personal. Every day we confront choices, challenges, and circumstances shaped by factors beyond our control. Yet within these forces lies the potential for reflection, creativity, and meaning. How we navigate life's script determines the quality, depth, and significance of our existence. One of the most powerful implications of considering our lives as partially scripted is the call to responsibility. If much of our behavior is influenced by biology, environment, and social context, the temptation might be to dismiss accountability. I could not help it. I was predetermined to act this way. Yet human experience consistently demonstrates that reflection matters. The ability to pause, consider consequences, and act intentionally is central to moral and practical responsibility. Responsibility is not invalidated by constraints. It is defined through the conscious engagement with them. Existentialist thought reinforces this insight. Life presents a complex web of limitations: death, chance, circumstance, and social structures. Yet it also presents the opportunity for choice. Sartre described human beings as condemned to be free, highlighting the paradox. Freedom exists precisely because we must navigate constraints. Awareness of our limitations does not negate freedom, it gives it direction and depth. It is in this tension that human life acquires richness. Creativity is one of the most tangible expressions of freedom within constraints. Artists, writers, musicians, and inventors operate within biological, social, and technical limitations, yet they generate outcomes that could not have been predicted in advance. Constraints do not eliminate creativity, they shape it. Similarly, in everyday life, problem-solving, decision-making, and moral judgment involve improvising within the boundaries of circumstance. The interplay of constraints and imagination produces novelty and significance. Philosophy and psychology together suggest that human meaning is constructed rather than discovered. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, argued that even in the most constrained and dire circumstances, individuals can find purpose through choices in attitude and action. The extreme constraints of concentration camps did not erase freedom entirely. They highlighted the freedom of mind and perspective, the ability to interpret suffering, and the capacity to act with meaning within circumstances. This echoes earlier philosophical traditions. Freedom may not be the ability to change everything, but it is the ability to respond authentically. Modern cognitive science adds another layer. The brain constantly integrates past experiences, predictions, and present conditions to produce decisions. While some of this process is unconscious, humans possess the unique capacity to reflect, simulate scenarios, and anticipate consequences. Planning a career, managing relationships, or deciding on moral actions engages this reflective capacity. Freedom emerges not in isolation from causality, but within it, as a dynamic negotiation between internal deliberation and external influence. Life's script is also a social and cultural narrative. We inherit stories, customs, and norms that guide expectations and shape possibilities. Yet we can reinterpret, challenge, or innovate within these frameworks. Literature, history, and cultural reflection offer models for navigating constraint creatively. By observing how others have shaped their circumstances, we gain insight into our own capacity to improvise and adapt. Freedom, then, is relational. It is exercised through engagement with the world and with others. The probabilistic nature of reality, revealed through quantum physics and chaos theory, adds yet another dimension. Life is not predetermined in absolute terms. Events can surprise, unfold unpredictably, and respond to novel actions. This unpredictability is not mere randomness. It is a space for agency. Decisions ripple outward in complex and often unforeseen ways. Our actions influence not only our immediate circumstances, but the emergent patterns of relationships, communities, and environments. The script is incomplete, and our creativity helps write it. Human consciousness magnifies the stakes. Awareness allows us to anticipate, evaluate, and revise. Through reflective thought, we can recognize patterns in our lives, identify limiting scripts, and intentionally modify behaviors or interpretations. Freedom manifests as an ongoing practice of engagement, noticing influences, weighing options, and acting with intention. Life becomes less about avoiding constraints and more about navigating them with insight and purpose. The existential challenge of freedom also involves embracing uncertainty. In a partially scripted and partially probabilistic universe, outcomes are never guaranteed. The tension between hope, anxiety, and responsibility is intrinsic to the human condition. By accepting uncertainty, we cultivate resilience, creativity, and the ability to respond adaptively. Freedom is experienced not as a guarantee, but as a lived commitment to act meaningfully despite uncertainty. Ethical responsibility is inseparable from this navigation. Our choices affect not only ourselves, but others. Understanding the influences on our behavior, from unconscious neural processes to social pressures, can cultivate empathy and temper judgment, while our capacity for reflection enables moral action. Freedom and responsibility are intertwined. Awareness of constraints empowers us to act deliberately, while recognition of agency grounds ethical engagement. Ultimately, human life is a co-creation. We exist within biological, social, and probabilistic systems, yet we contribute to their unfolding. Our decisions, reflections, and actions influence outcomes, relationships, and culture. The universe is neither perfectly scripted nor entirely chaotic. Within its patterns, humans exercise agency, craft meaning, and leave traces of intentional action. Freedom, in this view, is not absolute independence. It is the capacity to shape, respond, and participate actively in the unfolding of life. By embracing this perspective, the question, "Are we scripted or free?" becomes less about certainty and more about practice. Life invites engagement, reflection, and creativity. Constraints do not negate freedom. They provide a framework in which freedom can be exercised meaningfully. We improvise, we respond, we imagine, and in doing so, we co-author the story of our existence. This approach offers both humility and empowerment. Humility comes from recognizing the forces, biological, social, probabilistic, and historical, that shape our experience. Empowerment comes from acknowledging the capacity to act consciously, reflectively, and creatively within those forces. Life is a partnership with reality. We do not control everything, but we contribute in ways that matter. Meaning, responsibility and freedom are lived in a delicate balance between influence and agency. Hello again, and as we reach the conclusion of our exploration, let us pause and reflect on the tapestry we have woven together tonight. From the myths of ancient civilizations to the cold elegance of Newtonian physics, from the strangeness of quantum mechanics to the intricate workings of the human brain, we have explored the question, are we scripted or do we possess freedom? Throughout this journey, one truth has emerged repeatedly. The answer is neither absolute nor simple. Life exists in the interplay of forces, constraints, probabilities, and conscious choice, and in understanding this, we find both wonder and responsibility. Science has shown us that our world is governed by patterns, laws, and emergent complexities. Classical physics suggested a deterministic universe, a vast clockwork where every particle followed precise rules. Neuroscience revealed the profound influence of unconscious processes on our decisions. Quantum mechanics introduced uncertainty, and chaos theory showed us that even deterministic systems can be unpredictable in practice. The brain, embedded in biology and culture, integrates countless influences to produce thought, reflection, and action. Freedom, if it exists, emerges from this complex interplay. Philosophy has offered ways to interpret and navigate this complexity. Compatibilism suggests that freedom is compatible with causality, arising when actions align with reasoning and intention. Existentialism emphasizes the profound responsibility and creativity inherent in human consciousness, urging us to live authentically within constraints. Ethical frameworks remind us that freedom carries obligations. Our choices affect not only ourselves but the wider world. Even within a universe that is partially scripted, we are active participants, shaping the narrative of our lives through reflection, imagination, and deliberate action. Cultural, social, and environmental forces further enrich the picture. We are born into narratives, norms, and traditions that guide behavior. Yet these scripts are not immutable. Awareness, reflection, and creativity allow us to reinterpret, resist, and innovate. Human freedom is relational. It is exercised in dialogue with the world, within networks of influence, and through engagement with others. Our lives are simultaneously structured and emergent, patterned and unpredictable, constrained and open. On a personal level, this understanding has profound implications for how we live. It invites humility as we recognize the forces shaping us. It encourages mindfulness as we become aware of the choices we do make. It fosters creativity as we realize that even within constraints, novelty and innovation are possible. It calls for responsibility as our decisions ripple through relationships, communities, and environments. Life becomes a dynamic negotiation, a continual process of navigating scripts while exercising agency. In this context, sleep offers a unique lens on the interplay between determinism and freedom. Sleep is a natural rhythm, a biological necessity shaped by genetics, environment, and the cycles of the planet. It is a period when much of our conscious control pauses and unconscious processes, memory consolidation, emotional regulation, and cellular repair, take center stage. Sleep reminds us that some processes are beyond our immediate control, that part of life follows patterns we cannot command. Yet within this surrender to natural rhythm, we also regain freedom. The freedom to rest, rejuvenate, and wake renewed, ready to act intentionally within the world. Dreams, too, reflect this balance. In dreaming, the mind improvises within constraints. Neural networks, memories, and emotions provide structure, but imagination weaves patterns that surprise even the dreamer. The unconscious generates stories that are both patterned and unpredictable, reflecting the same dynamic we see in waking life. Dreams serve as a metaphor for human freedom. We are shaped by forces beyond awareness, yet we create experiences, meaning, and narratives within those bounds. Contemplating our own life script during sleep, or in moments of quiet reflection, can illuminate paths forward. We can observe the influences that shape us, recognize habitual patterns, and consider where reflection and intention might alter outcomes. Awareness does not guarantee freedom in a simple sense, but it amplifies the capacity for meaningful action. Like a musician improvising within a score, we navigate the notes provided by biology, culture, and circumstance, creating our unique melody. The integration of science, philosophy, and lived experience reveals a profound insight. Life is neither entirely scripted nor completely free. It is a negotiation between forces, probabilities, and consciousness. Recognizing this tension can inspire wonder, curiosity, and a sense of purpose. Freedom is not absolute independence. It is the capacity to act intentionally, reflectively, and creatively within constraints. Scripted elements provide structure. Emergent and probabilistic elements provide novelty. Consciousness provides awareness. Together, they create the dynamic space in which human life unfolds. As we rest and drift towards sleep, we may allow this understanding to settle. Let it offer reassurance. Even when life feels predetermined, we retain capacity for reflection, choice, and engagement. Even when chance and uncertainty intervene, we can navigate with intention and creativity. Life is a canvas of patterns and improvisation, structure and unpredictability, constraint and possibility. Freedom exists in the act of living attentively within this balance. In the quiet of night, we experience a profound echo of the larger universe. Sleep teaches us surrender and renewal, just as waking life teaches us engagement and responsibility. The cosmic, neural, and social scripts converge in the rhythm of living, reminding us that our agency, though bounded, is real, meaningful, and transformative. Each choice, each reflection, each creative act contributes to the ongoing story of our lives, revealing the dance between determinism and freedom. So as you prepare to rest, consider this balance. Allow your mind to integrate the insights of science, philosophy, and personal reflection. Let go of what you cannot control and cultivate awareness of where you can act intentionally. Sleep, like life, is both structured and emergent, a space where the boundaries of control and freedom intersect. In this intersection lies the possibility to awaken renewed, to navigate the script with creativity, and to participate fully in the unfolding of your own story. Tonight, let the rhythm of sleep remind you. You are part of a universe governed by laws, chance, and emergent patterns. Yet within it, your consciousness, reflection, and intention carry the power to shape your life meaningfully. In the interplay between script and freedom, you are alive, present, and engaged, an agent of creativity, responsibility, and wonder in a universe that is as mysterious as it is structured. Rest now, letting your body and mind renew, and carry the awareness that even within patterns, you are free to act, to imagine, and to live intentionally. Your story continues, and within the dance of structure and spontaneity, your agency persists, delicate and profound in every choice you make.